votre disposition pour vos émissions en direct de notre studio, dans vos églises et même dans vos maisons. Appelez-nous sur notre numéro WhatsApp. Boss Brothers TV, tout le monde en parle.
Hiya and welcome back to Accompanied by Jess. My name is Jess and of course I'm your host today on this platform. As you already know, on this platform we discuss the deep, delicate matters of young people of our generation. Yes, as you can see, today is Monday. I'm actually starting on Monday, not Friday, but I'm very happy to be back, and by the grace, I will be back with so much more consistency. As you already know, due to the sensitivity of the shows and the nature of the shows, I will not be disclosing any names of any person that I'm actually discussing, but I have substitute names to cover for them. Of course, let's get to the story. As you can see by the title, it says, I am not different. I'm not different. Well, what does that mean? You know, where are we going with this? This is actually a story about a young man named Nathaniel, and he had contacted me alongside with his mother to discuss their story of him suffering with autism. His type of autism is not severe autism. It's quite, you know, it's not severe autism. It's quite decent. However, he does have a stutter with his autism and pretty difficult for him to have speech. He goes to school just like everyone else and all these other things. So his autism is, as I said, is not severe autism, but he does have autism. Slow in speech, has a very strong stutter, and he just said, you know, he wants to share the story of kind of like what he had gone through and explain that he is not different. Unfortunately, to explain that in this day and age, there are a lot of people who actually, you know, get bullied due to disabilities, due to the fact that, you know, they feel that they're different to other people because of the way people portray them. And of course, you know, many people are not really accepting of children with autism. So, you know, he's explained his story, and I believe his mum had actually helped me to bring the story together. The story actually begins from when he was much younger. I'd say actually from the age of, like, not even the age, from months, literally weeks when he was born. You know, he was living with his father. His father's name's Leroy. Unfortunately, he doesn't live with his father anymore, and I will get to that stage very shortly. So Nathaniel and Anne, obviously, Anne is his mother. Anne had been bringing him up. She gave birth to him. Nathaniel's at the age of 20 now, so she had already given birth to him, you know, 20 years ago. And they raising him up. She was with her partner Leroy, who's Nathaniel's father. However, you know, there was a little bit of issues between Leroy and Anne due to the maltreatment that Nathaniel was receiving from Leroy. So from the age of, I think when he was about 3 weeks old, Leroy was a little bit insensitive to Nathaniel, his own son. So as a father, he had actually been mistreating him, abusing him for no reason whatsoever. Many occasions that Anne would leave the house and probably do some quick shopping whilst Leroy would take care of Nathaniel. Leroy would actually be very, very, very harsh to his own son and actually leave and begin to pinch the baby from as small as 3 weeks old. Unfortunately, this was the case. So, you know, this was something that occurred quite a lot in the early stages, where the baby would be screaming at all hours of the night, unnecessarily, not like a normal child would. Anytime that, you know, Anne had left the room and had come back, or she had gone out to eat, to quickly grab something, some groceries, and had come back. So, you know, Anne had explained to me via email that, you know, one of the first incidents she had noticed of Leroy's actions was actually the first time when she would come home and she would see the baby at 3 weeks old with a few bruises. She was uncommon of it. She thought it was probably a skin disorder or something had happened to the baby. She was quite nervous. Like explained, the second symptom was consistent screaming and shouting of the baby. So whenever she would not be home and she had probably popped out to go get some food from the shops, you know, a bit of grocery, by the time she had come back within the house, she could hear the baby screaming at the top of his lungs. You know, she sometimes wouldn't understand, so she would walk through the door, she'd be like, oh, what's wrong with the baby? You know, at that time Leroy wouldn't show any sign of, like, you know, the baby having issues. He would show fatherly care, but Nathaniel had actually been crying. It continued as well up until about the age of 2, 3. You know, the consistent abuse from the father to the child, and with time, you know, Anne had actually realized that Leroy didn't like the child and was consistently asking, like, you know, why are you leaving the child in so much pain? What kind of, you know, really had gotten her realizing that, okay, this is definitely Leroy doing this to Nathaniel and this is completely wrong, was actually the fact that one day she had actually popped out. She had to do a bit of house shopping, you know, decor for the house, just general house shopping that was necessary for the house. She had gone out. She was also with her sister-in-law, Leroy's younger sister, and they were looking after Nathaniel at the age of 2. And it was time for him to have a bath. And of course, Leroy had already told, you know, his sister, you know, this is how you bathe a child. And the temperature of the water was extremely cold. So the baby wasn't being bathed in warm, natural water, you know, water that was actually okay for the baby. But the child was being washed in extremely, extremely cold water. So, you know, Anne had gone out. She's come back now. And, you know, she's walked through the door. And she could see her son and, you know, and her sister-in-law there. You know, she's just taken Nathaniel out the bath, and you know, she's wrapped him with a towel, and you could just see Nathaniel just shivering. He's shaking, literally uncontrollably, completely uncontrollably. Like, she didn't know what to say. Of course, you know, at that time, symptoms of his disability had not been seen. You know, they were unaware that, you know, their child could probably have a form of disability at the age of 2. You wouldn't really know. I believe the symptoms would have showed probably later on, about 4 or 5 years old. So she was kind of like shocked, like, why is my son shivering? She asked, you know, why is my son shivering? What's going on? And, you know, the sister-in-law said, oh, you know, I've been told to wash him, and this is how Leroy's been washing him in cold water. She was like, no, you don't wash a child like that. I'm sure you're a woman, you know, at least you looked after someone else's child at some point. You cannot wash my child in freezing cold water. This caused a lot of disputes, and I believe with time, you know, between Leroy and Anne, it just literally just shredded apart within 2-3 years. So they had separated at the age when Nathaniel had reached the age of 7. They had already separated, gone their separate ways. So it was consistent fight. You know, Leroy literally showed no love for his son, no concerns, nothing like that of that sort. Which obviously disheartened Anne at the time, and obviously she was helping me explain the story whilst, you know, also with her and Nathaniel, what they had basically encountered due to his disabilities and due to the problems that they had faced. So they had separated. I believe now at this point, symptoms of his stuttering and speech was so evident. And rather than his speech getting any better, of course, you know, a normal child would be growing up, they're speaking normal, mummy, daddy, you know, normal speech, socializing in school. What she had noticed from Nathaniel, and as Anne said, you know, his stuttering had now begun. Stuttering. It wasn't as bad, you know, you would see a bit of stutter, you'd be like, okay, this is a bit normal. But now it was actually a case where he would be stuttering, there would be a long pause, and then the next word. So she started to gather up this information. Also, studies in school were a bit difficult for himself, especially in the area of English. He had issues with English, and, you know, reading was a problem. You know, like reading words, putting things together. They had probably thought that it was dyslexia at first, but it really wasn't. It was a form of autism. Socializing with friends from time to time had become a bit difficult because obviously his stutter was now getting in the way, and at the young age of 7, 8, he was already starting to be bullied at school. So, you know, they tried to now look for a resolve for this matter, and, you know, he was still going to mainstream schools. They didn't necessarily exclude him from the other children, just so that he doesn't feel that he's, you know, completely, you know, abandoned or out. Now, Nathaniel also shared his experience of growing up having this stutter, and obviously having, you know, I'll probably put it in the category of mild autism. So it wasn't severe, it was just mild, it was just, you know, a little bit. Most people wouldn't know he has it just based off the way he is. You know, he sits down, he talks like, you know, he talks, you know, he'll greet you. If he has to say hi, he has to say hi. But when it comes to genuine long conversation, the stuttering is literally very noticeable and very evident. So he said, growing up, it had been a bit of a battle. He did get bullied about his stutter. Now, he said from the age of 16, he began to self-harm himself. So he would lock himself in the room and he would start to take a blade and self-harm. And this because at the time that he was reaching secondary school and it was GCSE stages, 15, 16, you're already starting your GCSE, you're getting ready to, for exams and everything. He said it had always been difficult for him to do class tests, and if he had tests, it would be obvious that he would get one of the lowest scores in the class. Many occasions, many people would bully him in his classroom saying, oh, you're slow, you're stupid, you're dumb, and they wouldn't help him at all with anything. It got to a point where he would literally walk out of class anytime that he wanted to, or he felt that he was going overboard. Many times his teachers would not interfere in the bullying in class, and this persisted for so long, hence why it reached a stage that he started to self-harm. He was cutting himself, from time to time he would start pulling his hair, or he would feel that he was unnecessary. He would just lock himself in the room and literally wouldn't eat after school. All these symptoms, and I could imagine just how Anne had felt at the time, him seeing her son going through this, and he hadn't done anything, completely innocent from being hurt and abused by your father domestically from such a young age, and then now you're going into school and you're being hurt. And of course he had been removed completely from his dad, completely living away. He doesn't unfortunately have any contact with his father. He doesn't talk to him in any way. He doesn't have any contact with Leroy. Now, there was one particular day that he had explained to me that, it really hit rock bottom for him, and he just felt like he wanted to take his life away. He had finished school. He was walking home now, making his way home from school, and he was on his way from school, and he realized that there was a group of boys behind him. I believe there was about six boys behind him, walking, following him. He found it a bit suspicious at first, but he kind of ignored it and just, continued. Basically ignored it, continued. Started walking. He then realized that when he got on the bus, they also got on the same bus. Same stop, they got off the same stop. So he started walking down his road, and these boys were still following him, and it was a bit suspicious. One of them had a bike. So when they were getting on the bus, this child put on the bike on the bus, followed as well. One of them had a bike, and when he got to his road, the one on the bike had gone right in front of him and literally stood in front of him and basically stopped him. Then he realized that others surrounded him, and literally out of nowhere they started blowing punches in his face, pushing him, kicking him, spitting on him, and calling him all sorts of names. He was brutally beaten. He had his arms over his face, literally completely being battered. It was actually his neighbor who had seen what was happening and had to literally help him and chase those boys away. The moment he had gotten up and was able to get to his door, and his mum was actually at the door, the mum was kind of like, what's going on? He was covering his face because there was blood dripping from his nose, from his, his mouth was bleeding, nose was dripping. He had already had bruises on his face. He literally didn't know what to do. He was in tears. His mum was devastated and was kind of like in shock because she didn't know what's happening. She didn't know that this would be happening to him, where he would get chased home and actually be beaten because of the way he was. That's when he had hit rock bottom, and all these symptoms of locking himself in the room, not wanting to go to school, cutting himself. He said he felt like he was unloved. Nobody loved him, despite his mum was there and his mum loved him, but he felt like he couldn't have friends. He couldn't talk to anyone. He couldn't share, have a casual conversation with people. Socializing was already a bit of a bad, wasn't the best. He tried. All that his mum could do was raise awareness in school, to stop the bullying and to stop all these things. They had actually now had to move him from the school that he was at to another school, and this was for his own safety. The young boys who actually were doing this had already had history of mischievous behavior, and one of them was already being had been going through cases, had different cases. So they all had cases of mischievous behaviours, and another one was actually going to be sent to juvenile detention. You know, I believe that after a year it had settled a little bit, it helped a little bit that he had moved schools, he was somewhere where people had understood. And what had made it a lot better was that in the school that he attended, the mother Anne made sure that, you know, the school was aware, they were aware that, you know, you need to ensure that your child, you know, she made the school aware that every person in each school, in each class, knew what each person's disability had, and they made it, you know, they made it aware. Anti-bullying was made aware in that school. And I'm thankful that even today, anti-bullying is made very, very much aware. It's something that, you know, the BBC talks about, ITV talks about, all these places, campaigns are being made. You know, bullying is still happening. So this is what they had shared. How he had overcome it was also having therapy, being helped with his speech, in schools, you know, private sessions, being pulled out of class, to being spoken to. So he had to actually get a little bit of therapy to help him out. And his mum did everything she could to take him to different places, holidays, all these things, just to settle the matter. Such a common story, but, you know, to have actually gone to a degree where you're now being physically beaten, physically violated, due to your circumstances that you didn't choose to be brought up with, is something that, you know, it's very painful. It's very, very painful. But I must commend Nathaniel. You know, he says he's very happy now, like things have changed, and because their awareness, and he's part of these campaigns now, from time to time he goes around into his classes making speeches at the time that he was at school. That had really helped. And even when he reached the stage where he had gotten to college, you know, he was doing this. He made, you know, awareness for different people to know what autism was, the types of disabilities that everyone can have, stuttering issues, if anybody has, you know, speech issues and needs speech therapy. So, you know, I believe that that's such a touching story, and I'm very thankful to have received such a story like that, which is different. Different in the sense that not many people express, you know, bullying as much. Not people actually express the severity of what they had gone through in terms of bullying. And I'm very, very happy that, you know, a resolve has been found. He's healthy, he's happy now, and, you know, he's taken it on board. He says he now wants to go into his degree. He wants to pursue, you know, a business degree. He wants to do something new. Despite, you know, the equality, especially with working now and having a disability, sometimes it's a bit hard to find jobs and work. But he said, you know, education will definitely help him to get to that place, especially if he can acquire the skills that he needs. Of course, you know, his weaker subject was English and writing, but he's managed to push himself to get to a stage where vocabulary and written English has become, you know, a little bit more, much at a better degree. So this is what he shared with me, and I'm very happy. You know what, Nathaniel, thank you so much for sharing your story. I'm sure that there is somebody else who has actually gone through it. I've also shared on this topic a little bit more before in previous shows, you know, about having a relative who has autism, and you know the things that they go through, the things that they've experienced, the way that they are, you know, treated differently from others. And there's several cases that many people, you know, get abused because of disabilities, because they are deemed different, because of that. And I just want to encourage anyone out there, you know, you're different. Everyone is different, and they're different uniquely, but do not consider them, you know, as abnormal just because they don't do things the same way that you do. Hence why the title is called I'm Not Different. So this is something I really feel happy for him now, that, you know, he's seen a different perspective of life. Suicidal thoughts and wanting to take away his life had literally reduced. You know, all these things had literally just, you know, reduced at a minimal. He feels like himself. He's much more happier. So I'm very happy for you, and thank you so much for sharing your story with me. And I'm very sure it has encouraged somebody out there. So yes, I'm gonna definitely be back here at 7 p.m. on the Boss Brothers TV. Same platform, same place, same time. So yeah, keep watching, and if you have any stories that you want to share with me, please contact me on accompaniedbyjess@gmail.com. I am more than happy to read and share your story. Please don't be shy, but I'm here to help. Take care. Bye bye.
Boss Brothers TV, désormais sur satellite et en RDC. Soyons connectés avec l'excellente musique congolaise. Suivons des moments de joie et d'amour avec les fêtes de mariage et d'anniversaire. Nourrissons notre foi en Dieu avec les services de prière et de culte. Suivons l'histoire du Congo et les documentaires des Congolais. Soyons connectés sur les actualités des filles et des fils du pays partout dans le monde. Découvrons des émissions de qualité, partageons notre savoir. Nous sommes à votre disposition pour vos émissions en direct de notre studio, dans vos églises et même dans vos maisons. Appelez-nous sur notre numéro WhatsApp. Boss Brothers TV, tout le monde en parle.